Hello, everyone. Welcome to Writers and Books Visiting Authors Series. My name is Dan Hurd. I'm the Director of Adult Programs. Writers and Books is a nonprofit literary arts center in Rochester, New York. We offer readings, workshops, and literary programming for people of all ages, all currently available online. Our theme for 2021 is Taking Care. We'll be celebrating all the ways we can take care of ourselves and take care of others this year. You can check out our full upcoming schedule at wab.org. We're so excited to have Athena Dixon with us tonight. First, we'll hear from Athena, then she'll be in conversation with Kristen Gentry, the director of the creative writing program at SUNY Geneseo. Please say hello in this chat and let us know you're there. Feel free also to submit questions to the Q&A function. Athena's book, The Incredible Shrinking Woman, is available through our bookstore, Ampersand Books. I'll put the link in the chat. Drawing on an unconventional nonfiction storytelling structure derived from the game MASH, Athena Dixon's Memoir-in-Essays is a nostalgic, compelling journey of self-discovery. Unpacking life's unexpected experiences, Dixon embarks on a winding road to find the answers to one of life's most pressing questions. Why must I shrink to avoid disruption? Athena Dixon is the author of The Incredible Shrinking Woman and No God in This Room. Her work also appears in The Breakbeat Poets Volume 2, Black Girl Magic, and in various publications, including Gay Magazine and Narratively. She is the founder of Linden Avenue Literary Journal and the co-host of New Books in Poetry podcast. Athena, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm going to read 3 pieces from my collection. The first is the opening essay titled A Goddess Makes Platinos. A Goddess Makes Platinos. I'm standing in the kitchen making platinos. It is a Friday in the summer, and all of the windows of my home are open. I'm trying to create some semblance of peace today, but you are on my mind. I believe I can forget the bitter of these last years and smash the sweetness of memory between my teeth. I am wrong. Soon, waiting for the edges of the fruit to caramelize, I am sitting on the laminate floor, staring up at the spidering of brown dots from the bathroom leak above me. There is comfort in connecting the splotches into patterns, finding the images in the blank spaces until my eyes ache. I close them, and the insides of my lids glow red. This colors the world, and for a moment, I can forget what brought me to the floor alone, letting the coolness sink into the backs of my thighs. No matter what I think I am forgetting, I know I'm never really alone. My memories are viscous, and they settle into me each night. These bones bedding down and fighting a war, lonely for some fat, a sliver of love. I sleep to the left, so close to the edge I'm nearly falling. When I am bold, I starfish my body across the mattress, arms and legs thrown to the 4 corners of my room. My bottom arches my back from the padding, and before long I am curled left again, and morning wake makes its way in from the backs of birds and garbage trucks. This is life in the city, so different from the sounds of trains or the sort of fog that covers the backyard like a down blanket. I like it here because here I am new. Here I can shed the layers I've crafted over the years and become bare. In theory, I can be whomever I choose, and this is reflected in the things scattered about my apartment. My old college roommate once said a woman needs only 3 things: red lipstick, high heels, and a vibrator. I have all 3. But in the end, I am the same as I have ever been, a study in cardigans and Chuck Taylors, a portrait of curls and a bare face, a face morphing into my mother's as the years go by. I'm starting to dissect the ways we are dissimilar, the ways we are exactly the same. To the men in this new city, I am a challenge, perhaps a puzzle to decode. I am skittish, yet I invite them close enough to see the whites of my eyes and the red painting my lips. Then I disperse into a cloud of songs they can no longer listen to, and into the void of erasing me from each of their memories. But from afar, I long for them. I hope to curry their favor until they finally see me. What they actually see, I'm not sure. It is when I am seeing when I am afraid, not of them, but of myself and the havoc I can bring. I've learned I can spiderweb across the man's life in equal parts love and regret. I'm not easily forgotten, but often left behind. I become a bridge between things these men want to forget and the lives they desire, some sort of way station between the men they are and the men they hope to be. I'm never quite enough, and yet always way still too much, too loving, too clingy, too good, too nice, too hard to pin down, too irresponsible, too much off the mark, too much of a prude. Sometimes these men get caught between what they seek and what they seek to lose. And before long, everything has crashed down around us, the dust and ruin of our collective lives now smoldering at our feet. This pattern of men coming and going is easily traceable throughout my history. Perhaps it is my accommodating personality, or fear of confrontation, or lack of connection. Maybe it is my easy swallowing of words that have allowed men to ebb and flow. It is probably all of the above. These men write their names upon the vellum of my skin. This way I can never forget them. I'm sure I leave inscriptions of my own. Perhaps it is a bit of melody or a gap in the story. The men's names are not many, still readable but slightly faded. But beneath the thinness of my breastbone, passersby can see a collection of hearts beating. It is a steady pomp and circumstance that directs my daily movement, slow and plodding and endless. On the counter above me, I can smell the heaviness of oil from the stove, the Platinos now soaking through a layer of paper towels. My stomach ripples to life, only to be ignored so I may concentrate on what is important, starvation for something more. My body is heavy. It is thick and full and untouched. I smash it and find myself soft, yielding. It is unexpected. I mash into my skin like the Platinos press, trying to mold myself into something these men will love, something these men will remember when they are starving. Instead, I bruise myself the color of the ripened fruit, a mess that hides the sweetness inside. It says on this edge of rotting where the best is found, but the rot brings flies and wolves. It makes them circle, starving and ready to strip flesh from bone and heart from chest. But I know I don't want to be picked clean. There should be nothing left of who I was before these men. It makes it easier to forget. I want to be devoured, so there is nothing left except the memory on only their lips and a hunger for more of me. Thank you. The second essay that I'm going to read is titled Lakeshore, and there is a content warning for sexual assault. There's really no backstory you need to know about this essay other than it takes place during the time of my separation and my actual official divorce. Lakeshore. Somewhere in a man's memory in Chicago, I'm nothing more than failed head in a hotel room. I can picture the aftermath, him sliding the bulk of his body into his car after the valet brought it round for him. I can see him disappearing into the streets of the city while I am left behind, shaky and trying to catch my breath. He is escaping his actions, poloed down from the width of his shoulders to the bottom of his feet. But I am there, balanced on the edge of the bed in the W Lakeshore, a bowl of congee and a creme brulee warming on the desk, the condensation of a Coke sliding down my palm, my hands trembling from my gulps. I am trying to stop my skin from burning. The back of my neck still hums from the press of his hand. I told him, I can't. I'm on my period. He is unfazed, standing and pushing his pelvis towards my face. That hand, heavy not in weight but in tension, is barely a whisper against my body, but I know the pressure of him willing my head forward towards his unbuckled jeans. The printed rim of his boxer briefs, polo too, peeks out at me like a black hole threatening to swallow me entirely. He doesn't say anything aloud, but his body is screaming for pleasure in ways I am unwilling or able to provide. I am supposed to be in Chicago only to visit the Field Museum, not to meet up with a man I've only known through Tumblr. When I drove the hours between Ohio and Illinois, I daydreamed about uncovered bones and new memories of old things. I thought of water lapping against shores and room service, anything to forget that in this city is where my husband's affair began. Instead of sticking to my plan, I make him my first stop after an impromptu DM and push the museum to the next day. I invite him to my hotel room that overlooks the lake and the pier jutting from its shore, telling myself I want to put a face to a name. But it is hard to separate my intentions from his desires, and even harder to erase the hum of his touch from my skin. After he leaves, I scrub myself clean in the hotel bathtub, gliding the white bar of soap across the parts of me he's touched until I feel too slick to safely exit. I sit there wondering when my body will feel like its own, when I will stop doling it out for scraps of warmth that are soon snatched and shattered like amber before me. I don't sleep that night, but the following morning, I find my way through the middle passage exhibit, pitching my body through the dark. In the haziness of the mock ship, I am frightened by the ghostly shadows of slaves stenciled into the walls. I squint, trying to find them more solid than memory. I feel sick to my stomach. There is something about the space that sets my heart to pounding and makes me dizzy. I want to escape these ghosts, escape the eerie silence changed only by the creak of my sneakers against wooden planks. But I can only hold on to the fact I am steadily moving forward. I know there is another patron several steps behind me, and he is just as dizzy if his footsteps are any indication. I hear the drunken pattern as he tries to find the wall, and I know he is looking for any sliver of light that will guide him out of this darkness. I adjust my eyes, learning how to see through a pitch black that seems endless. I move toward sounds, maybe a human voice or two. I do not want him to catch up to me. I'm overwhelmed enough without the scent of his cologne in my nostrils or his shoulder brushing mine. But I hear him, and the space is getting smaller and smaller. My steps are even more unsure. I want to buckle, to collapse down into the nearest corner until he passes and my breath evens. I feel ashamed. Ashamed because he is not the one who is still looming in the corners of my hotel room and my now further tarnished memories of this city. Ashamed of my fear because this museum goer's nearness is nothing. Or I tell myself it is. I say, no man has ever raped you. Assault doesn't count. I rationalize and rank penetration higher than unwanted touching. I convince myself that things could always be worse. I say to myself, at least you weren't washing the taste of him out of your mouth or the blood from your thighs. I feel the fear at my back like wind, and I slow enough to let the man pass. I pretend to be interested, maybe enraptured by the eyes staring out from all around me. I stay there, pushing and pulling shaky breaths until I am alone in the dark. I want to press my palm against the wall, to study and connect, but this is a museum, and even in my fear, I am respectful. But I tuck that fear inside and concentrate on putting one foot in front of the other, knowing that in the morning, this will be a memory and Chicago will only be a skyline in the rearview mirror. I keep moving towards the light at the end of the tunnel, emerging at last, stunned in place by a sold sign standing as a welcome and a warning. And the final essay that I'm going to read tonight is going to be the title essay of the book, The Incredible Shrinking Woman. I know the difficulties of navigating a fat body on a plane. It starts by tucking my arms and narrowing enough to make it down the aisle while ignoring the eyes of the first class passengers. It's an exercise in praying no one is already buckled into the end seat and hoping that just maybe the middle one is empty. So it comes as a surprise when I find rising annoyance with the equally fat woman seated in front of me on a flight hovering somewhere over Utah. For the duration of our 6 hours, sharing United's ample seatbelt room but pseudo-folding chairs, she has reclined into my knees and rocked her body into my space while she tries to make herself comfortable. I have huffed, muttered, and cursed at each jerk and press of her body because I know bright pain will shoot through my already sore legs. And I want to yell at her that we women of size must know what it is to shrink. We cannot grip the back of the seat, arcing it as we escape to the tiny lavatory that makes us shuffle in, hoping we fit. And I want to scream at her about our shared tallness, how she should know how precious little room there already is, and now my inches are hers. And I get tired of her flipping her hair. I'm just waiting for it to break this barrier of her seat top and touch me. It doesn't, but I'm still angry. And when her jacket pushes its way between the seat and caresses my kneecap, I'm not sure what to do with myself. As we lower ourselves into California, I fight the urge to be one of those who jump up and linger in the aisle. At least there I am able to command space. My body would unfurl and I could tower, brown and proud. But as we land, the staccato of her body beats rhythm against me each time she shifts, which is often. I'm risking being the angry Black woman tapping her on the shoulder and reminding her to keep her bulk to herself. Be a respectable fat woman, I want to say. But she is not just fat. She is also white and blonde. There's privilege there that impacts our bodies in different ways. It is not the fat that separates us. It is power in the ability to say, this space is to be occupied any way I see fit. I'm simply trying not to cause waves, trying to prove through my folding and tucking that I belong here, that I am not what you expect me to be. I am a good fat woman. I'm reading a book of essays, and I politely decline the snacks and drinks. I didn't want to be the source of a rattling pretzel bag and the crunch of salt and dough echoing. I want to tell this fat woman about the time I cried or reading Shonda Rhimes' The Year of Yes on a plane towards some destination I can't remember. How when I read about the time the seatbelt wouldn't fit across her waist, I was experiencing that exact embarrassment for the cardigan across my midsection. Or the humiliation of a flight attendant making me show her my buckled belt while the cabin filled around us. Or how I went home after that trip and researched which airlines have the most room, or if it was legal to bring my own seatbelt extender because I'd be too ashamed to ever ask for one in real time. How I'd resigned myself to being flung from my seat in a crash because that was better than asking for help. I wanted to tell this fat woman about the doctor who refused to treat my knee that had popped out of place until I agreed to go to a bariatric meeting for the same hospital in which he practiced, and how I went to that meeting, and then another, until yet another doctor made me cry. The doctor I picked next because she'd stood before our consultation group and said, I'm not here to make you look good in a bathing suit. I'm here to make sure you're healthy. I liked her because she was honest and I didn't care about a bathing suit. I just wanted to shrink. I wanted to rattle around the bottle of prescription weight loss pills and tell my fellow passenger about how I had to ease onto them, fighting nausea so strong my coworkers were afraid for me. How I spent a discounted $100 every 4 weeks and took an equal amount of pills a day for months until I couldn't take it any longer. How I'm thinking of going back to them once more. I said none of this, just groused beneath my breath and vowed to upgrade next time I flew. What I couldn't say to this woman, or anyone else for that matter, is that I've yet to figure out just how to exist in the world. I haven't quite figured out what version of myself I believe in the mirror. Do I believe those days when I see a beautiful woman with a body that fills out a dress like an hourglass? Or the version of myself that has a ladder of back fat climbing towards unattractiveness? Do I believe the me that can fit her hips easily into a train seat, or the one that comes away with bruises after sitting in a stadium? Most days I pick the fatter one because it's easier to bounce back from that low when the things don't go as planned, or the clothes don't fit, or the swelling in my legs make people think losing weight would solve all of my problems. And deep down, what I really wanted to say to this woman was that it's not actually her fault, because it was not her who asked me who's going to want a big woman with short hair when I chopped it all off in college, gave me the sage advice of a man doesn't care how big you are as long as your stomach is flat, or inflicted the pain of the man I loved, reminded me of my sexual unattractiveness, the largeness of my ass, and his lack of satisfaction as I stared at his equally large body. She couldn't have known any of this, She couldn't have known any of these things that afternoon as snowy mountains gave way to rolling green hills outside the windows. So maybe I was just seeking a kindred spirit, a kind look between the seats that let me know that while her tucking and folding may have been different, she was trying to shrink too. And just maybe I wanted her to share a bit of her confidence, a confidence that allowed her to spill over her seat and into the spaces beside and behind her, and afforded her the bravery to actually use the lavatory without fear of rising from her seat and having to buckle in again. But there is a part of me that knows my anger was rooted in fear, a fear of her constant moving, calling attention to the both of us. I kept wanting her to shrink because I was doing my best to disappear, and I just couldn't make my body any smaller than it already was. I thought the more she moved, the more the people around her would huff and puff as I was doing. And before we knew it, we'd be nothing more than just two fat bodies taking up the window seats and too much of the armrests. It would be too painful for me to try to explain to this woman the aches that last for days after my flights, because once I lock my body into place, I am afraid to move. I've read too many stories of people angry at largeness creeping into the spaces they paid for. I could never shoulder that embarrassment. Instead, I wanted to ask her how I could shed the fear of rising, of inflating to all that I am, including the reasons I am traveling. In my shrinking, I have not just shrunken my body in its presence, I've collapsed down everything I am. On that plane and in that seat, I have made myself so invisible that the destination is no longer important. It only matters that I am not too much of anything, fat, black, or wide. On our final approach, with Portland gray and misted below us, she stands a final time to adjust her clothing and carry on. Again, there is a rocking and jerking of the seat and more curses under my breath. This time I think she hears me, and for a moment I swear I see a flash of blush on her cheeks. This is my final shrinking, the one that comes from being seen. This is the first time I see shared recognition of our size, but when she sits, the press of the seat is the same as it has been in the hours beforehand. I lock my muscles as we bounce onto the runway, a ritual that comes with every landing. I'm fighting the force of jet-fueled engines in order to stop my weight from invading the space of the passenger behind me. As we deplane, I try to shake away the insecurities, tucking the bits of them into the seat back pocket and leaving trails of the rest along the narrow path towards the coolness of the Oregon afternoon. I'm careful to avoid my hips brushing the seats, even if they are unoccupied. But ahead, I see her with the meat of her hips swaying against the leather, and I want to ask her how to reverse the shrinking to become as open as a wide blue sky. Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you.
Man, yeah, whew, there's so much, there's so much to unpack in these essays. I'd like to remind audience members, if you have a question that you would like to pose, please present it in the Q&A, or you can throw it in the chat. But I'll begin just with I'll begin with MASH, because I was interested in the form. It sparked nostalgia. It conjured waiting in the bus line with my friends and using initials backwards to ID my crushes. So like, I was interested in what led to the creation of MASH, and was this essay previously drafted in different forms? And if so, what were they, and what finally prompted you to use this form for this piece?
MASH has always been exactly what it's been, but it is the remnants of a couple other games that I wanted to include in the book. One of my readers, Lara, made a good comment to me earlier on as we were kind of shaping the manuscript, that she thought I should weird up the manuscript. And so it kind of went from having like a Mad Lib to the MASH game. I was going to do an actual like reader insert. There were all these different things. But the reason why MASH ended up staying in was because it was like the best transition for me to move from what I thought life was supposed to be until what it actually turned out to be. So it's kind of like this last gateway between fantasy and reality. Somebody did note, and it was very interesting, they asked me about the game before, about why the choices were, for the most part, like positive and things that I really wanted. There were really no like kind of joke entries in it. And that was like on purpose, just because in my head, when I said this is what I want my life to be, there was no like room for it not to be true. So these are the best options I can pick. And obviously everything after that kind of fell apart. But yeah, MASH has always been exactly how it's been. It was never an essay, it was never longer form. It was strictly meant to be a game.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll move on to native tongue. And in that essay, the narrator declares of herself and other small town Black Midwesterners, "We are neither Southern nor Northern. We are not subway trains or towering projects. We are the towns where the graffiti-laced trains stop, those insular places where we race the side of the road to get a glimpse of bubble letters we can barely decipher." Her description of herself as a, quote, not quite Black enough fat girl who played cello and had the popular kids telling her that her tie-dyed short set was corny, which I think is funny now because tie-dyed sets are like everything now, continues to paint the picture of a Black girl struggling to find her place in an in-between place where Black identity often lacks sufficient and accurate representation. She finds aspirational images in MTV's Yo MTV Raps, her mother's friend's daughter Greta, and her cousins across the tracks, but often doesn't feel confident in her place in the community. The narrator states, "What I'd been trying to craft after a steady stream of Black movies, television, soundtracks, and a childhood of masks was a version of Blackness that never quite fit me or where I lived." And as the essay concludes, the narrator explains, "Videos aren't that important to me now, but there are other ways I catalog, other ways to be inspired, other avenues to Blackness and self-acceptance. I can find it now through scrolls of Instagram and swipes on Tinder that allow me to know that I am whole, worthy, and acceptable just as I stand." So the question that I have is, can you offer some of those spaces online, Instagram pages, blogs, sites, YouTube channels, what have you, that have inspired you and offered those other avenues to Blackness, as well as some book titles and writers that have offered similar inspiration to you and would currently be appreciated by other Black girls and women who find themselves stuck in gray areas?
Okay. I have my go-to books. So my favorite book of all time is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. And I think that that's an important book because, excuse Philadelphia, it gives like the language of her place. That it's not her mimicking other languages. It's not her being apologetic about where she's from. It's, this is who I am. This is where I grew up. This is where I'm rooted from. And just being very proud of it. So that book always. It was also the first book that kind of made me put it down and pick it back up because I was kind of thrown off by the language. And it took me a couple of years to come back to it and appreciate it. I would say Issa Rae's book, The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl, just because in terms of just like the way it's put together, essay-wise, it's not overly wrought, but it's also very relatable in terms of being able to talk about just everyday experiences. Sometimes we as Black writers are expected to trade on so much trauma and be so serious all the time. And it was just a way of saying, I'm just a regular, odd, slightly off-kilter Black girl. One of my favorite books, Sonic Memories by Kia Jefferson, because it's a beautiful meld of family and music and just being a person and growing into who you are. And it doesn't have to necessarily always be about, again, trauma. Like trauma exists within life and tragic things happen, but this is also the story of me growing. I would also say Another Brooklyn by Jacqueline Woodson. Just language-wise is beautiful. The story is beautiful. And again, it's like a vignette of life that is like real everyday life. In terms of Instagram accounts, I like Black Archives. I love the photos that they post because it's, again, it reminds you of like old photo albums. Black market vintage, because I have a Jones for Black Americana, and I think it does a very good job of curating art history in a way that's not exploiting it or making it all about the negative aspects of it. I would say sites that are Bookstagram sites that help celebrate Black writers, like A Good Book, Melanated Reader, Reggie Reads. There's a whole slew of them that I follow on Instagram, and Black Bookstagram really does a really good job of helping uplift Black writers of all kinds, of all genres. And I will honestly say Tumblr still, because Tumblr is this wealth of Black creatives who build these lovely little communities and niches based on every kind of fandom or music you can think of. Specifically, my Black Panther fan fiction writers. It's my favorite place to be. Did I cover everything? I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
They gave some direction if you needed it.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So The Incredible Shrinking Woman, that great piece that you just read, was spurred by physical interaction with another person, much of which many of us aren't getting these days due to the pandemic. What has writing been like during the pandemic? Do you find much difference in writing now versus writing pre-pandemic?
I think for me, it's been a little bit odd just because right before we got into lockdown, my book had been picked up and it was about to come out. So I spent most of quarantine either in pre-production for my book or doing like a virtual book tour or events. But I will say that I've actually been writing about the same. I've had some lulls here and there, but I finished the draft of a novel this summer, which is the first novel I've written. And I'm now working on the second collection of essays. But I will find that I've had to like force myself to have grace and gentleness with myself, because there were some times there in the summer and a little bit in the last couple of months where I've made myself feel like if I'm not doing something or writing something or creating something, I'm wasting this time, and having to step back and say it's okay. But my pace hasn't changed too much, but it is, I think, strictly because I had a book and because I've been so forced to be within like the literary space because of that. But I will say that it also gave me opportunity to try new forms. Like I said, I finished a novel this summer. I've been playing around with a couple of scripts and a graphic novel, which I don't think I would have done had I been like just out in the world like normal. I would have been concentrating in my normal genres.
And I like I admire that about your writing. It seems like there's a fearlessness to it, as far as I think often a lot of writers can restrict themselves into like genres, like I'm a poet and that's what I do, I'm a poet, or I'm a fiction writer and that's what I do. And you're just like, if I want to write it, I'll write it. And so I just think that's great.
I think the work tells you where it needs to be. Like some stuff for me just can't be a poem. So some things can just not be an essay. They need to be some other form.
How do you, and I was gonna ask you a question about that, so you just easing on in there. But so yeah, so how do you know when the idea comes to you or whatever? Like what is the instinct that lets you know, okay, this is a poem, okay, this is an essay, okay, this is going to be fit for a graphic novel? Like what is that, like what are some of the clues that make you aware of what form is right?
Generally for me, I will get like an idea or an image and I'll have like a file folder on my laptop called Scraps, and I'll start playing around with it. And I can usually tell when I start thinking about like what direction I want to take it. I usually think of like my writing as like an arrow. So I have like the top arrow is like the vehicle that I'm going to tell the story, like what scenes I'm going to use, and then the bottom part of the arrow are the actual like things I want you to feel or I want you to experience. And if I start thinking about that particular idea or image, and I can't think of at least 3 of those things, it's probably going to be a poem because it's meant for me to be shorter. But if I can think of multiple avenues into that particular topic, then it's going to be something longer. And then in terms of like the graphic novel stuff, I usually pick those kind of ideas out of like random dreams that I have, or like just weird things that I can see visually in my head, but I can't think of how to write them on paper. Then I think that they have to be some other kind of project, which is kind of where the script and the graphic novel came from, that they're very visual things in my head and I can't find the words to write them. But that's the first place it starts. Can I find something other than this initial image to build upon? And if I can't, I think it needs to be a poem. If there's a lot to explore, then it's going to be an essay.
Thank you. That's a cool way to do it, like breaking it down like that, like outlining it. Okay. So in continuing that point about the point about genre, in in an interview with the Rumpus, you made a point about how the work that you produced for this memoir in essays were like the quote is that you started writing personal essays as a way to cope and as a way to survive, and that writing was a coping mechanism and a way for experiences to be memorialized. So does writing poetry offer a similar sort of healing that you speak about when writing creative nonfiction, if the subject is autobiographical?
It's oddly not. Outside of a handful of poems that I've written that have never been published, generally the poetry that I have put into the world has either been for like open mics performance wise, or has been in direct response to some social issue, but it hasn't necessarily been about myself as a person. So there's this weird divide between my poetry and my creative nonfiction. Creative nonfiction almost 100% is me writing to get something off my chest or get out. And if it ties to something larger, then okay. But poetry for me has almost always been a direct response to an actual issue, whether it be social, educational, whatever it may be. So I never really go to poetry when it comes to turning into like a personal thing. It's always creative nonfiction for me.
Thank you. Okay, I'm being told we have time for one more question. Is there a question from the audience? Okay. So also in the interview, I did some research. You explained that through writing, you explored your past self, the present, and the possibilities of the future. And you ask, what does it really mean to be Athena Dixon? And so I'm asking, what does it currently mean to be Athena Dixon?
Wow. I think it needs to be in flux and on the cusp of change. I've been very fond of telling people the last couple of months, I feel like I'm at this critical mass, and that if I don't make a change towards things that I really, really want to do and things I really want to experience, the universe is going to do it for me. So I feel like it's a work in progress, a person in flux, but a person probably the most confident and settled that she's ever been in her entire life. And that doesn't mean content, but it means happily headed towards contentment.
Great. Great. Thank you. I think, Dan, that's the last question that we had time for. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thank you to Kristen and Athena. I want to thank our co-sponsor, Quayle. You can buy The Incredible Shrinking Woman at Ampersand Books. You can catch up with videos of our past readings on our website, wab.org. This reading will be up there as well within a week or two. And I want to say thank you all for coming and have a great evening.